All right, triggering fucking show alert. Hey-o! Hi, it's Kendall here. If you're new around here, welcome. Not new around here, what is up, home? Skillet Biscuit, and I'm sad. I watched a very, very good show that has been going around on the internet, on this here interwebs, called Baby Reindeer. What I thought was originally a dark comedy out of the UK is that there's certainly that there, but ho, hey, whoa, it's definitely a drama, and I shouldn't have did my makeup today. I just realized that because I'm gonna cry. If you've never heard of Baby Reindeer, it is, or what I thought was, a dark comedy about a man named Donnie who is stalked by a strange, obviously mentally ill woman who shows up at his job one day as he's working at a pub. And don't get me wrong, there's certainly very comedic moments, just partially due to just the absurdity of some moments. Let me tell you, man, this shit is so good. It's the best show I've seen in a minute. It's really good. It hit me. The only thing I can really liken it to that I've seen in the last year or two is Fleischman is in Trouble. It reminded me of that show because I have yet to feel this type of deep sadness and dread. This one even more so than that one though, because that was on FX and this is a Netflix original show, I believe. And baby, both good as but both triggering as shit. And I cannot address that enough. And there was a lot for me to think about, a lot for me to process. There's a lot of things that just get my wheels a-turning. The story follows a Scottish man by the name of Donnie, and he is a bartender aspiring to be a comedian. So he moves from Scotland to London to follow his dreams. And one day he meets Martha, a eccentric, incredibly flattering, but strange woman. And Donnie finds himself completely infatuated, not with her in like a romantic sense, but he finds himself clamoring after her attention. So much so that it makes him ignore the very real signs that this bitch is crazy. And again, what started off as a very darkly funny, offbeat story about two people who in their own way are very similar, not wrapped too tight, but it turns into kind of a retrospective of how that even happens in such a eccentric way. And it becomes an incredibly visceral story of trauma, and it bummed me out. But it doesn't stop me from telling people about it because I've been telling all my friends about it. I say, hey, if you sad today, don't watch it. If you think you can't stomach bad news and bad vibes today, don't watch it. But if you can, tis a very good show. Holy shit. Obviously, I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it already. And obviously, I'm going to spoil it because today we're talking about what happens. Also giving, of course, my commentary and just things that got going in my head as I was watching it. Now, with that said, if you can't handle it, maybe this video can be a bit of a stand-in so you know what happens. But big content warning, there's a lot of stuff about depression, mental illness, sexual assault. But I think the thing that in some ways is even more visceral and was really hard to watch had me, I was watching the last 2 episodes in a cafe and I was there with someone and I was like, he was watching me like scrape at my nails. I was so like, oh my God, I'm so sad. Like, this is f***ing me up, dog. So if you think you can handle it, definitely recommend watching it because it's so visceral and it's such a fascinating look on kind of the things that we have talked about a bit on the internet. You know, when we talk about like men's loneliness and men's isolation, I feel like this is a story that actually peers into that self-loathing, shame, masculinity, sexuality, sexual violence, the dark side of aspiring or aspiration, loneliness, the futility of going to the police when you are in an issue, like when you're having a problem. Like, I've made jokes, dark jokes on this channel many times that the police only help you when you have a stalking case if you're already dead, probably not even then. And also just the burdens of tackling those traumas in public. Also, how someone can be their own worst enemy. They're kind of their own undoing. And it's just painful to watch, baby. But beyond all that, it's definitely a story of redemption, maybe? I don't know if redemption is the right word. Rejuvenation, starting over. And again, it had me on the brink of tears for several episodes, either from laughing in the early episodes because they were funny, out of frustration in the early episodes because the main character initially I did not like, but I found my heart tendering towards him as we went along because we learn more of why he is the way he is, and you just grow this like pity, not in like a, oh, you're so pitiful, but like I'm really careful to use that word pity because people sometimes think like, ew, that's such a bad word, but I mean it. I feel bad for this dude. Like, it's devastating. but rejuvenating. And if you think you could stomach it, again, I would highly recommend watching it. But if you don't think you can stomach it, perhaps this video will help you nosy bitches that are not willing to sit there and watch all 7 episodes. We can like hold each other's hands along the way. And I'm gonna try not to cry in this video because I was over there like, why? But first, we have to pay bills. So I'm gonna send it over to Admiral Kennie. Thank you. Hello everyone, this is Admiral Kennie, and today's video is sponsored by NordVPN, the virtual private network that I've personally been using for years to keep my internet browsing safe and secure. With NordVPN, all of your internet data stays safe behind a wall of next generation encryption. As someone who works in public a lot, I travel pretty often. I'm always watching trash on the internet, the sacrifices I make. It's great to know that NordVPN masks my IP, keeping my browsing and downloading private so that my internet provider and nosy trackers can't see what I'm doing online. I'm also someone that watches content from all over the world, and that's really handy when you can't find something in a US server. So I just go over to NordVPN, get on one of their many thousands of servers in over 60 countries, and I could pop up and be in the UK in spirit with one click and find things from around the world that way, all without compromising speed, performance, or safety. And it's not just for your computer either. You can put it on up to 6 devices, keeping your phone, your tablet safe as well, especially on the go. So right now you can get a 2-year plan with a huge discount, plus 4 additional months for free when you use my link down in the description box. That's NordVPN/Kennie. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's nothing to lose. Just click on that link. That's NordVPN.com/Kennie to get down with that deal. Big thanks again to NordVPN for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get on to the debauchery. There's so much to say about this show. Again, it's a story about a man who's being stalked by a woman. That in and of itself is so much to unpack there about men when they are the victim of stalking or assault, especially sexual assault, or any crime that in some way or another gets mocked or seen as not as serious because the perpetrator is a woman, and how society, patriarchy, misogyny ultimately still f over men as well. And I don't think I've seen a show that quite touches on that so explicitly the way that this show does. And it's amazing. And also, again, sometimes really f***ing funny, but it's mostly really depressing once we get past episode 4. So buckle up for that. But then there is like a bright side-ish. Bright sides, kind of. Also, there's much to be said about the aftermath now that the show has been out. So let's get started. Episode 1. This episode begins with our main character, Donnie, and it starts with him going to the police to report his stalker. Tonally, from the beginning, the show is quite like quirky and mildly comedic, and even though it's like obviously a very serious topic, it's handled in such a darkly funny, kind of absurdist way as 2 men talk about the very real issue of Donnie being stalked. So the police officer doesn't seem to take this threat very seriously, and as unfortunate as that is, it's not a shock to me. They often don't take women's being stalked seriously. I would be very surprised if they took men being stalked seriously. But Donnie does insist that he's being followed by an older woman and she's not well. She needs psychological help. And so the police officer asks, how long have you being stalked by this woman? He says about 6 months. And this prompts the police officer to ask, what took you so long to report it? And thus we go back 6 months to learn how everything with the stalker Martha began. So Donnie was working in a pub in London. He had moved there a few years ago with his now ex-girlfriend, Keely, and he had started working in a bar as a bartender to make ends meet. And one day, in comes a portly woman, about 15 years his senior, and Donnie says that the emotion that he felt immediately upon seeing her was pity. He felt bad for her. He felt sad for her. Just looking at her made him feel sad. She was whimpering, obviously upset to some degree. When she comes to the bar, she doesn't have any money. She can't afford anything. And so Donnie just offers her a free cup of tea. And from that moment, it was pretty clear that Martha was immediately enamored with him. There's a lot of things that Martha does to kind of gas herself up, most of which we can all presume from the beginning are not true. She says she's a lawyer, a very high-ranking and decorated one at that. So as you'd imagine, it's kind of strange she can't afford a cup of tea. Donnie, much like I did, assumed she was just a fanciful liar, and he doesn't seem to concern himself with it much after that. that. Mostly because he's very enamored and encouraged by her laugh. He refers to it as this giddy, disconcerting laugh. And the more that she would laugh to things that he said, the more he wanted to earn her laughs. This is where we see the first of many screenshots of messages that Martha will send Donnie, all of which were horribly misspelled, but that's how you knew it was her. And this would be the beginning of such messages that will show up throughout the show. This one read, "I need a nice boy to take care of me. He who looks like a baby reindeer." As we'll see, Martha will call Donnie baby reindeer or little reindeer or something of that variation. And for pretty much the entire show, we have no reason why she does that until the very end. But this is essentially how we know that in the misspelling, that it is Martha talking as she emails him an email with addresses that are just letters and numbers and completely incoherent. Again, Donnie had moved to London to follow his dreams of being a comedian, but things had definitely gone off the rails quite a bit ever since he had moved over, give or take 5 years ago. Since then, he had taken random dead-end jobs and was now living at his ex-girlfriend's mom's house. And it's pretty apparent from the jump why he hasn't made any headway with the comedy, because he is not funny, like at all. He is categorically some of the worst shit I've ever seen in my life. And the guy fucking sucks. But it does explain why the attention, even from someone that he's not interested in any material way, is alluring to him and something that he encourages more and more as Martha comes to the pub every day wearing new clothes. Obviously, they're trying to impress him, to flirt with him, get a Diet Coke, which he would give her for free. And she would spin these long tales of how like interesting and fanciful her life was, which just couldn't be true because you were in this pub all damn day. When did you have time to have this interesting life, Martha? You here from opening to closing, talking to me, and you never drink the drink. You're just talking to yourself about people that don't exist and things you didn't do. But despite that, and even though he knew that, Donnie welcomed her coming because she was very flattering to him. She complimented him a lot, complimented him on his looks, laughed at his dumbass jokes. Despite recognizing he knew she was a bit mad, that didn't stop him from being enamored with her, and it didn't stop him from encouraging her and flirting with her. And so, with that fascinating mix of flattery, pity, fascination, he continued to flirt with her, promising her things like going places with her, knowing that he had no intention of following up. It was harmless, and he did it because he wanted to hear her laugh. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is a trend in this show is the approval of other men, particularly the men that he works with in this context. They start to notice the pattern of him kind of flirting and Martha coming around, so they end up teasing him about it, joking like, when are you guys gonna when you gonna smash genitalia? Show me your genitals. I just unlocked a memory for you. Your genitalia. And she makes the jokes that sounds vaguely sexual in regards to needing help to hang her curtains. And so, feeling unable to escape this incredibly painful situation, he leans in to the sexual joke and continues it. And though everyone else starts laughing, Martha doesn't. Martha's dead ass. Baby reindeer. Roses are too cliche. I can't do the accent. Think outside the box for me. But I did it! I can come several times in one sitting. I will teach you. It's all in the fingers. I've got to go. She starts sending emails. So many emails. Oh my God. So many emails that would range in their level of vulgarity. And he doesn't shut down this behavior at all. Again, continuing with that like flirtatiousness. So much so that she believes on her 43rd birthday that they're going to go out and go on a picnic together because he said he would go on a picnic with her. Donnie gives her a soft letdown, saying that picnics are for lovers, but eventually they decide to get coffee as friends. Coffee? Christmas fun times, oh yes. I almost bought a thong for you and thought, who am I, 16? I didn't need that thing riding up my gosh. I didn't need that thing riding up my gosh, splitting me in two. So they go to coffee. And it seems that, again, Donnie has this constant push and pull between letting her down and getting her hopes up. And honestly, truly, I was starting to fucking hate this guy. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, sure, this chain wrapped too tight. She's giving stalker energy. She probably would have stalked him anyway, regardless of how he leaned in or encouraged or not. But god damn it, it was frustrating me because you could have just said, no, I'm not interested. Because obviously when you're doing this, your fascination or your focus, I should say, is more on how that person is making you feel and not the fact that you have no intention of returning those feelings. And that shit pisses me off. It's like very annoying in general, but now it's just dangerous. Now it's putting you in a situation where you know that that bitch is insane anyway. So you're like, hey, you want to get even closer to me? You want me to feel? You want to touch my body? No, you can't. And it's weird that you want to. And I think the thing that started getting me really annoyed is because it just gives this hates himself. I don't care where the validation comes from. I don't care if it's from someone that I don't like. I don't care if it's from someone that I think is dangerous. I want that attention because I need it. I need that constant influx. And it's scary and frustrating and very common. I've seen a lot of people that are kind of like this. And I'm just like, dude, therapy, please. And you in the UK, you could probably get it for free. What is it? What is that like? People in the UK, Scotland. What is the rules there? Because if you can get therapy for free and you still not going, I don't know what to say. There's nothing left for me to say at this point. But I will say, even though this was my first inclination, like this nigga hates himself, I didn't know that this show was going to be so much about the premise and the topic of self-loathing, because that I think is very much so the core of this story. It's a lot of self-loathing, a lot about shame, a lot about acceptance, and how those kind of work with each other. But more on that later. Now, my frustrations are no lessened by the fact that she asks outright, are you serious about me? I can kind of do it, not really. And this is a perfect direct chance to be honest and forthright. And he says, yeah, I'm serious about you.
So, are you serious about me? I can take it. Just be honest.
Yes, I'm serious about you.
Oh my God. Wait, as a friend.
During this coffee date, his comedy career comes up and she notes that not only is it not going well, it's not good. She's like, wow, I saw one of your comedy videos. It was trash. Like it was really bad, like and offensive, like really terrible. You should do something about that. It's really bad. And he obviously gets a bit sullen about that, frustrated by how hard it has been to make your dreams come true, as people always talk about. And Martha says something in this way that Martha sometimes would, in this kind of poetic way, where she looks at him and she says,
somebody hurt you, didn't they?
On Donnie's face is this like shock and confusion. But before maybe he can even fully process that, Martha has wound herself up at the thought of somebody hurting him and gets riled up enough to have an outward outburst.
Martha, can you let go of my hand now, please?
I want names.
Martha, please.
Names.
Martha, please let go.
Don't you dare!
And somehow after this very awkward interaction, they decide to go to their separate places. But the outburst in and of itself left him curious. So he decides to stalk his stalker. Yep, he follows her home, looks through her windows as she like gets the day winding down, as she emails him. And because he had his phone on, she could hear his phone vibrate when she sends an email to him, prompting her to his appearance outside of her home. Baby Rain, I saw you looking. Ickle wickle peeking tom. That's hard to say. Anyway, Donnie continues his painfully awkward prop comedy sets, and in a room full of silence, out in the back, you can hear Martha, the sole person, laughing from her belly. And because of that, he's able to bounce off a few jokes that actually land in the room because of her. So now, despite Martha, again, being observably concerning, they seem to kind of have this symbiotic relationship where she's obsessed with him and he's obsessed with her being obsessed with him. So again, he indulges her. And now they've built this kind of weird pseudo friendship because Martha is one of the few people he isn't invisible to. But again, it's not like he didn't notice Annie Wilkes here is fucking insane. Like he goes to her Facebook to find out more about her and sees a bunch of photos of her poorly photoshopped into like important like historical photos with important people. And he also sees that she had posted a photo of him that she had taken secretly at the bar. And something in his spirit says, I'm gonna look this up. So he does that. And very quickly, very quickly, he learns that there is a lot to learn about Miss Martha. Mainly that she had been fired for inappropriate behavior with her boss, stalked him, falsely accused him of abusing his child. There was another article about her attacking that man's mother. And after all of this harassment, she was sentenced to 4.5 years in jail. Now, as terrifying as that information is, perhaps what's more terrifying is that Donnie is somewhat flattered he had a stalker stalking him. And so despite knowing that, he accepts her friend request on Facebook. Episode 2. So as you can imagine, Donnie immediately found himself regretting accepting her Facebook proposal. And despite that though, he doesn't remove her as a friend. Even when she starts posting inappropriate comments under his photos, some of which were very old when he was still dating his ex Keely. But of course she tries to reach out to him and he goes back and forth about whether or not he wants to officially turn her down. But instead of answering at all, he just panics and closes laptop. So, I guess I should talk about this too. Transphobia is also one of the things that are kind of a topic here because Donnie goes on a date with a woman named Terry who is trans. And immediately I can see another reason why I would dislike this man, because Terry has taken note that their last few dates have all taken place in this kind of secluded dark bar. And immediately my alarm bells went off like, so you're ashamed of her. You want to be around her in the dark corners, but God forbid someone sees you out and about with her and perhaps recognizes that she's trans and now she's made to feel like shit because you're too afraid and you hate yourself. Again, going back to this, I was so annoyed. Anyway, and I was right because that is what is going on. Like he is essentially hiding her. She doesn't know his real name. She thinks his name is Tony and they met on a trans dating site where he gave the wrong name, said he was in construction. Like he created this whole different persona on that website. And he thought it was harmless, thinking that he wouldn't fall in love with anybody on this website where he was, I guess, just fishing around, try trans people out, I guess. But then he met Terry and she was a therapist from the US and she had all of these traits that he had always wanted. You know, she was very confident, beautiful, smart, self-aware. But again, the thought that somebody, some random fucking stranger, or maybe somebody from the pub were to recognize him out with a trans woman and all hell would break loose. Jesus. And I get it. I get the fear in the sense that this world is very transphobic, right? But I just feel like it's fucked up to put that on the trans woman who did nothing wrong and you just have a bunch of shame. Then don't talk to fucking trans people. If you feel like you gotta hide the person you're with, you're not doing no trans person no fucking favors. Weird ass nigga. Anyway, again, if it's not clear, I do not like Danny at this point. Donnie, whatever the fuck. Tony, whatever his name is today. Again, sure, that doesn't mean he deserves to be stalked, but this nigga ain't wrapped too tight either. And he didn't discourage her because at the end of the day, he didn't care that he had a stalker. He wanted to feel wanted. He didn't find her dangerous. If anything, he found her validating. Like, ooh, I got a stalker. Again, made him feel visible. My God, is it dangerous to live this way? Just like flittering from the smallest attention of one person to the next. It's scary and it's frustrating to watch, especially when you know it's all gonna boil down. It's all gonna end real bad just because there's no way it can end good if that's how you're going, man. You're rolling down the river and over a bridge. Anyway, speaking of frustrating, Martha, she starts being weirdly possessive, particularly over photos of him and his ex Keely. And with that, instead of like telling Martha to go f off or something, he goes to Terry and says, we should lay low for a while. What? He shows her the emails and Terry too sharp for her own damn good because she's like, why is she calling you Donnie? Why is she saying you work in a bar in Camden? What does the police have to say about all this? Why haven't you gone to the police? And he has a bunch of weak excuses for all of these things. He doesn't feel like it's that big of an issue. She's just a little, you know, she's harmless, you know? And she's like, well, if she's harmless, why are you telling me to lay low? And I can imagine, again, that could be very triggering for a trans woman who undoubtedly has met men in particular who are too afraid to be honest that they like trans women and by proxy keep them in a back pocket somewhere in a shelf, their shame box, as me and my friend call it. Like whenever we've done something in dating that we don't want to admit to, like, oh yeah, I'm keeping that in my shame box. You keeping trans women in your shame box. That's disgusting. I feel that way. If you feel like you too shameful to date a trans person openly and proudly, leave them the alone. But she's like, figure it out or I'm gonna have to come down there to that bar and figure it out myself. So into the bar Donnie goes. And for the the first time, I guess in an effort to create some form of boundaries, when Martha sits down asking for a Diet Coke, he charges her. Recall, he's been giving it to her for free. This upsets Martha because obviously there's a shift that has taken place now. And she starts getting upset. Again, even if she wasn't crazy, I could understand how she felt let on by him. And she starts crying. Instead of just being honest, saying like, I'm not interested in you, he lies to her again in an effort to soften the blow. And he's like, I'm sorry, it's the age gap. Like, I want to have kids. And you know, the age gap is just too much. Remember when I said that a lot of men are afraid to be the bad guy, so they become the worst guy? This is an example of that. You could have just said, I'm not interested. I'm sorry. You know, go along, be on your way. And maybe she still would have stalked you. That's not to say he deserved to be stalked. But what I'm saying is, you're not helping yourself, nigga. You're making this worse on yourself, nigga. Like, it's frustrating me. Villain beetroot out of oh, bleeding beetroot. I don't know what that means. Villain beetroot out of my vagina. Giant, yeah. Rims of the gunk. I don't know what the that means. Is that her saying she's on her period? I don't know how she made it like an unpleasant experience even worse, but okay. Jesus. Doctor says I've got eggs of the 20-year-old. So when would you like to poach them? That's... She's not Rizless. Some would say she got the Rizness. That's a very niche K-pop joke of the current. I don't know that many current K-pop songs, but that one's fire because it's Taemin, whatever. Anyway, now when she floods his emails, she's talking about her fertility and how she's definitely able to have kids. Like there's no blockage for us in her mind. And because there was no blockage, they were a thing now in her mind. She would come to the pub 2 hours before opening and spent the entire day following him around, talking about their future, what they're going to name their kids. And the names are always terrible, and getting agitated and annoyed by her constantly being there. Donnie goes up to his boss and like coworkers. Again, these men who are his peers, the bros. And again, men around him are a lot of his audience of who he wants to appeal to and who he wants to impress. He goes up to them talking about whether or not they could bar Martha from coming to the pub. And they were like, no, we're not going to do that. Not only are we not going to do that, upon looking at the emails that she had been harassing him with, they decide to send one on his account that says, would you like to pork me in the butt? So now Martha thinks that Donnie, the man that she's stalking and obsessed with, wants to see that booty hole. Is it brown just like a Toblerone? Pink like Pepto-Bismol? Let me see your booty hole. Baby, won't you let me know? Let me see that booty hole. Let me see your... Bet it tastes like you ain't never took a shit. Sorry, let me stop. Anyway, so she like, when we gonna do it? When and where? I'm prepared. I'm ready to get it. We gotta go. So, and in order to avoid her, instead of going to his comedy competition that he was gonna go to, he asked to change the date so that he can get away from her. And instead, he goes out with Terry. This is where we learn that Donnie does coke. Another, oh, I guess I forgot about that also in the content warnings. Drugs. There's a lot of drugs. There's a lot of talk about drugs. Hey! And coke and other drugs seem to be quite a respite for Donnie, or at least he tries to make it so. But again, more on that later. Terry asks about Martha, to which he tells her that he had tried to let her down easy. Let her down easy if you know you had. I'm singing today. Okay, that one's mine though, so I can get away with that one. Or is it cheesy that it is my own song? And this is where Terry, good girl Terry, who always got the insight and always peeping shit that I peep, she's like, I think you like her. I think you like this attention. I read online about her getting convicted. So it seems very interesting that you haven't gone to the police yet, unless you like this kind of hyper focus she has on you. Because in your eyes, it's harmless. It just feels good to get that type of attention. Now, this doesn't seem to be a big chastising moment for her, because it doesn't stop her from asking him to come back with her to her apartment, you know, to get less sexual. As far as I understand it, they haven't had any type of sexual intercourse. And so he does go with her on the train, but again, so hyper fixated on shame and the focus of random people on the train that don't know you, specifically random men on the train that don't know you, and the prospect that they might think something's up with you and someone who may or may not be trans, because it's not like anybody knows. He decides to suddenly get off the train and leaves her standing there like, what the just happened? He walks back home. She like tries to call him and he doesn't answer. And instead he sees Martha, the little personification of his own shame, kind of, if you think of her that way. And she's standing there like, I heard you want to poke up the bum. I've never done bum stuff. Or you could try it. And he's like, I am not in the mood to deal with your bullshit. And this obviously aggravates her, leading her to say that the only men who are not interested in her are blind or gay. And you sure as hell not blind. I'm so sorry for this. I can't hear her without the accent. She also mentions that the person that hurt him that she guessed about was probably a man, but he doesn't acknowledge that and instead leaves, telling her not to follow, but she does, playing tag, quote unquote, with him in some degree. And eventually, when he's trying to push her away from him, she pushes him against a wall and grabs him by his genitals. And you can see his face. He just fossilizes. He freezes. Episode 3. Content warning, transphobia. Thank you. He takes a few days away from the pub and blocks Martha on Facebook, hoping that eventually she'll just grow bored of this and stop bothering him. That is not how this works. I already knew we got too many episodes left. That is not how this is gonna work. So he decides to go to Terry's house and finally tell her the truth. Tells her his real name, which is Donnie. He doesn't work in construction. He made up a job in construction because he wanted to seem more manly. His goal isn't to work in a pub. That's his dream, is to be a comedian. And Terry's like, that's all well and good. Get the fuck out of my house. Which honestly, I would say too, because you lied about so many like fundamental things. You need therapy, not a girlfriend. I know I say that kind of flippantly sometimes, and I think I want to really reiterate in specifically a show like this that gives us the opportunity to really hone in on the ways in which men's trauma is perpetuated by a lack of intervention, both by their peers. Like, other men don't tend to lean in to build like meaningful connection and community with other men, and therefore they are forced to believe that all of their suffering is always alone. And then when they do hear any input, it's often from women who are saying, oh my God, go to therapy. And I think what happens is they take it as a criticism as opposed to advice. Like, I'm scared for you. You going into dangerous waters when that's not necessary. Like, you need therapy. A girlfriend ain't supposed to fix you. A girlfriend can't fix you. You need therapy, baby. And I don't blame Terry, again, who you've been ashamed of being with, who you've been ashamed to say what your real name is, who she, like, you have all this shame around her. It's gonna make her feel bad. I'm not confused or blaming her for saying I don't want to deal with this shit. But in a sort of way to make amends of sorts, he does decide to change his information on the trans dating site and put his real information. So my thing is, like, other niggas can't tell your friends that you were on a trans dating site unless they were on there too. They think you gay for dating trans women. What they gonna say? You a gay nigga? Oh, Spider-Man looking at each other. What the fuck? So, anyway, so he comes home again. He shares, he rents from his ex's, Keely's mom, for rent, and she's currently running a cooking class. And guess who just happens to be taking it? Flashback to how Donnie ended up living at his ex's house when he had moved into her mom's house when they had moved to London. And at the time, they had only planned to stay there temporarily, 2 weeks at most. But eventually that 2 weeks turned to 6 months, which turned to a year. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, we are living with her mom. And then they break up and he has nowhere to go. So she moves out and she's like, it's fine if you stay living at my mom as long as you don't bring any chaos to her door. And ironically, here's Martha. Now, she's not going by Martha. Her name in this room is Sheila. And she had somehow convinced everybody in the room that she's just a delight. So much so that the mom is like, oh, you can stay here for the night if you want to, which of course she wants to. So when the mom walks out, obviously Donnie's like, what the f are you doing here? And this is the first time we get him to properly threaten to call the police on Martha, which does seem to scare her enough that she leaves. But not before she leaves a lingerie photo in his room to remember her by. Now, newly disturbed by the notion that she now knew where he lived, he had a new resolution to basically cuss her out and threaten her, you know, next time she comes to the pub, it's on site, you know, the police gonna be here on site. But she never comes. And any person that doesn't hate themselves too much would be relieved that she has disappeared, maybe a little disconcerted, like, I don't like the silence. But ultimately, the goal would be to not see her again. But oh, nay, this man hates himself. And so he becomes weirdly saddened or fixated on her absence. That's not to say she's not out there harassing people. Nay, she is harassing Keely on Facebook, which makes her go to him saying, hey, talk to your new girlfriend because she's been really terrible online. Tell her to pack it in. Now, unwilling to come to the pub anymore, Martha decides to sit at the bus stop closest to his home that he can see from the window in his room. And every day as he went to and from work, she would be sitting there, presumably the entire day, just to get a fleeting cat call out to him. But eventually the temperature starts to drop and she starts getting very cold and having this long, far off stare that brings back those initial feelings of pity and sympathy for her. So much so that he offers to drive her back to her home. When he's there, he sees sees her very like messy, and that's a mentally ill apartment, baby. I know. I know what a mentally ill apartment is. Ew. He makes her a cup of tea and says, as kindly as possible, please stop coming to the bus stop. And realizing that the only way that he can get this to maybe sink in for her is if he treats her as if they are in a valid relationship. So he's like, we need to break up. And he's somehow able to word this in a way that seems to work. Like, you know, he's like, think of the time we had, you know, think of the fairy tale, look back on it fondly, real fluffy shit. It was, I don't know. And then he leaves. Bereaved? I think that's what that's supposed to say. I don't know. Empty? I know you mean it too. Something in your eyes. So I guess this is goodbye. I love you, little reindeer. Forever in my heart. Art, whatever. And so thus begins the days without Martha. She isn't at the bus stop. She doesn't come to a semifinal comedy competition. Terry does come though, despite not having talked to him for weeks at this point. She was kind of there to just watch him bomb because that feels good when you break up with somebody. I've been there.
I'm sorry, these are...
My friends. They're here to stop me sliding into a familiar pattern of shame-based behavior with horrible men.
So he goes up for his competition. It is fucking painful, as usual. And, oh my God, this man is awful. Like, Jesus Christ. It's like, man, it's rough. But he is able to get a few laughs out of the crowd. None out of me. But guess who appears in the audience saying, I miss you? Oh, So with the awkwardness of the situation, Donnie tries to combine her outbursts with his comedy, and that seems to work until he gets upset with their back and forth, and he eventually says, hi everyone, this is my stalker Martha. Say hi to Martha, which sends her over the fucking edge.
Just to give you some context, ladies and gentlemen, this is Martha, my stalker. Say hello to Martha.
Don't you dare say that to me! Can't call me a stalker! Well, you're the one creeping around my house at night.
She then is like, how am I your stalker when you were begging from me bumhole? She then takes out her phone, showing everybody in the room that he was begging for a booty hole. Let me see. Sorry. And calling him a bumhole lover, which feels homophobic to me. And considering as we talk more about like Donnie and his, you know, issues with where he feels shame or not in his sexuality, it's not strange to interpret it as so. But eventually they kick her out and Terry comes backstage and she's like, I want to meet Martha because, you know, maybe, I mean, I'm a therapist. Maybe I can get through to her. And he's like, nah, let's not do this. But I will take this opportunity to ask for another chance with you. Can I have another chance? So they get a drink, they make up. But then here comes Martha, jealous and furious, ready to tussle. So much so that she gets to scrapping. Bitch goes up to her, slaps her in the face, punches her, pulls like a wad of hair out of the top of her head and screams, you look like a man. And now, finally getting some heat and some bass in his voice, Donnie is like, get the fuck out of my life. F you, bitch. It's over. Now, they just kick her out. No police are called that day, at least. So, great. Not that they would do anything. So, anyway, episode 4. This is the episode that broke me. It's the episode that really had me staring off into the ether. Content warning, we're talking about sexual assault. So, this is episode 4. This is the episode that me up. It really made me sad and I wanted to cry. I just pulled my and honestly every episode from episode 4 kind of me up. This is the hard one. This is the rough one. This one's bad. So buckle up for that. We return to the first episode, the first scene, right? When he was going into the police and telling them that he has a stalker. But now what was like a cute, kind of funny, quirky, darkly comedic scene of him going to report his stalker, despite having the same words said, is so much heavier tonally now that we know what's happening. Because in his retelling of this scene, he says he doesn't tell them her name, Martha's name. He doesn't tell them that she had a history with stalking. He didn't tell that she had attacked Terry the night before, that she had a history of similar crimes. He didn't say shit. He said, I think I'm being stalked and it's been 6 months. And they were like, well, why didn't you report it? Which led Donnie to the realization that there was something else at play here. And so this is the episode of what's the deeper underlying root of a lot of that self-loathing that has brought us to what's going on today. And also this episode starts with a content warning. So that's when I knew. I was like, oh, So 5 years ago, Donnie had gone to Edinburgh, a festival where he was, you know, trying to see the ropes of everybody. He's going to practice his comedy, do his first shows, make his dream come true. And quickly he learned that he's not funny and no one thinks he's funny. He was on stage doing his weird, quirky comedy, prop comedy. Nobody liked it. But things started to like look up a little bit when one day, while he was bombing on stage, he ends up meeting a big time writer named Darian who worked on a show that he was very very, very much a fan of. So admired this person, really cared about their opinion, really cared about their input and their influence, wanted to hear what his life was like, kind of hung on every word, found him to be an aspiration, an inspiration. And all of those things started to tick off alarm bells in my ear. That and the fact that my friend Chibi was watching it and she said, he's a redhead, ain't no non-evil redhead in film. He gonna be the bad guy. And I'm very upset because she was correct. Donnie was very much so primed and ready to jump into his orbit. He's hanging on to every word. He's everything that Donnie wanted to be, successful. He lives this free and interesting life full of cool experiences that he would never think to have. And not only did he live that life and have those inputs, he seemed to present himself as the person that can make Donnie's dreams come true. He begins to give Donnie tips, what to keep on his show, what not to keep, make his set better. And it seems that those moments of advice makes his shows better. They build up momentum. He starts getting more attention, more confirmation, more validation that him leaving everything and chasing his dreams was the right choice and not a complete waste of time. But Darian is like, you can go further in this creative process. There's just something under the surface about Darian and his way of going back and his way of going about things that, yes, on the surface seem well-meaning, but he talks as if he is the key to stardom. He is the thing that you need. And whenever someone says stuff like that, I always get like a rah, rah. It's very cult-like, very grooming behavior when someone's like, I'm the only one that can help you make your dreams. I see the beauty in you. You're so pretty. They love bomb you. Blah, 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 blah. And then in combination with that, Darian starts giving him drugs and basically says, hey, the people that are successful are wild. They do things. They live on the edge and they listen to everything I have to say. And so Donnie starts taking so many drugs. But luckily, or I don't know, it depends on how you look at it, I guess. Lucky for me, I would have been happy if I saw this happening. Darian suddenly disappears. Apparently he was on vacation or maybe he had just gone and left the area. And before you know it, Donnie was back to being momentumless. He was nobody. He had a taste of this life that he was clamoring for, but now it was gone because Darian was gone. And he associated those two deeply together. So instead, he decides to take acting classes at Oxford. This is where he'll meet Keely. And though she is there to be like a nice girlfriend, a good girlfriend, he couldn't shake this deep hitting feeling that he missed Darian and missed the confidence he gave him, because he would kind of like tell him like, oh, you're gonna make it. You're so talented. You're so this, you're so that. And so when Darian calls him and says that he would like him to write with him on a project, Donnie's like, I'll do whatever. I'm down. You know, Darian makes him feel special, tells him, you know, makes him do a lot of work, gets very, very critical, like vying for his attention and then taking it back. And then he feels as though all of these sacrifices he's doing for Darian will be worth it if he just holds on. He's not getting paid. And he's spending more and more time just zonked out of his mind on Darian's couch staring at the sky as he just spoke to him promises. You know, you're going to make it. You're so special. You're so talented. Yada, yada, yada. He would do a lot of drugs in increasing fervor. Crack, coke, GHB fruit cocktail. Anyway, and so one particular day he gets very, very high, so high that it makes him nauseous, and he crawls across the floor to Darian's cat bowl and vomits in it. And he's like apologizing. He's like, I'm so sorry. And in his mind, he feels like he had embarrassed himself so much that he had ruined his chances with Darian. And Darian comes over and, you know, pats him on the back, you know, trying to make him feel better. And in that whirling high confusion, he touches him inappropriately. Just think it, I'm sorry. The scene makes me so sad. Like I'm trying to not cry. My eyes are so dry. I don't even think I could. But there is a really something about the way this scene and a few other scenes in this episode are filmed are some of the most effective at making me feel that pit in my stomach, like that dread. That deep dread. And I've seen the show in its entirety twice now, and the second time was not easier, was not better. If anything, the second viewing is worse because you're sitting there hoping that it doesn't happen when you know it will, and it's just awful. It's just awful. And there's an explicitness within this like drugged out haze that just, it's haunting. That's the word. It's haunting. It leaves you feeling hollow. And it's, anyway. Donnie protests and Darian stops. He gets up as if it didn't happen. He goes to wash his hands and asks if he would like almond milk in his tea. And they just act like that's the end. But unfortunately, it isn't the end. Because despite having those initial impulses to avoid him, it's hard to turn that type of admiration and that source of validation off all of a sudden in an instant. Because like there's also this like period, I'm sure, where he couldn't even fully process or understand what had just happened, right? And so when Darian comes calling, promising him to write on his new project that'll propel his career, pushing him in new rooms, talking business that he didn't understand, he took the opportunity. When he was offered drugs again by him, he took them again and again and again. It had gotten to the point that he would go over to his house every weekend. And again, as drugs got harder and harder, but he was so dependent on his approval. Again, he would sometimes hit him with cold revisions and he was very critical, and then he'll come in and say he's a star, and you know, you're hanging on like bated breath to that. And around this time, Keely, they were dating at the time, is starting to notice like you're never around for important birthdays or important events because you're spending all your weekends getting high at some old dude's house. Mind you, I didn't even bring this up. At this time, he's supposed to be, give or take, in his mid-20s, and this guy is like 50. Donnie's completely brainwashed, groomed into believing that he's always almost there. He just spends more time, take more drugs, and keep dreaming with Darian. One day they drop acid, and there's a scene that, again, if it weren't so dark at this point, this episode has been so heavy, this scene would be absurdly comical, where Darian is like tribal dancing to random drums, and he's like, do you feel it? Do I look like a phoenix?
Important that you see me as something strong. A phoenix. A knight. Maybe one of those wrestlers that you like.
And Donnie is like so zonked out of his mind that he like suddenly gets like a paranoia wave, which isn't paranoia. It's actually probably being more clear-minded than he's been at any point in this, where he's like staunchly aware that this man is not safe. I am not safe here. He's trying to control you. He's trying to keep you in his clutches. You are not safe here. You have to escape. And so he does that, but he's tripping out. He's screaming. He's like, turn the music off. And Darian's like, the music's off, but we hear it still playing. And he's like crying and tweaking hard as shit. And to quote unquote calm him down, Darian gives him GHB. I don't know what drugs are. It's a liquid. I was like, I thought that was vodka. Apparently not. And this incapacitates him. And we have another scene. Again, both this mixture of explicit but shown in like a intoxicated haze, which honestly makes me want to cry. There's something like, again, that like pitted dread is so fucking palpable. I don't think I've ever seen a scene that made me feel like that. But he is assaulted, flashing moments of which he remembers. And oh my god, I don't want to cry. I hate crying on the internet, and I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna cry. I hate crying on the internet. So anyway, thank God for allergies. That's the only reason why I'm not bawling right now, because my eyes are so dry. But the scene's heartbreaking, like dead ass. I can't think of another scene that makes me feel, I don't think I've ever seen a movie or a show that made me feel like that. And even I think talking about it here, even if this quote spoils, I hate that word choice in this context, but like if it, you know, lets you know ahead of time what's going to happen, I don't think there's anything really I can say to like prepare you for the way that I felt or the way that you might feel. And again, this is the reason why I warn so heavily, especially about this episode, because if you have a history of sexual abuse of some sort, I just don't think it's worth it. Or maybe it is. I don't know if it's healing, but like I just would really think long and hard about whether or not you want to do that to yourself. That ass. With that said, kind of watching this made me feel guilty about how I felt about him in the earlier parts of the show, because now we know where that root is. Or maybe not the root, because he definitely had a lot of self-loathing prior to this, but maybe to such an extent that it had gotten so bad. This is the root. Yeah. I still have criticisms for how he handled Terry and Martha, but I don't know. It makes me feel all the more like, my God, like I just wish that you could find just that little bit of self-love so that you can discover a reality that doesn't hurt like this. It's just, anyway, after the assault, like Donnie knows what happened. There's a few like scenes that again are just so visceral that I just don't feel like it's necessary to explain them here, but he does stay for a few more days afterwards, which makes him feel a sense of loathing. But there is a scene where he like leaves out of the shower and Darian is there holding a towel and wraps him in it as Donnie starts to cry. And I think that's such a scene to encapsulate how interwoven the perpetrator-victim relationship can be. Like, rationality, quote unquote, would tell us that why would he stay, you know? But like, the person that hurts you is also the person that is healing you. It's not easy to just like break away from that. The person that criticizes you most is the person that gives you the most glowing reviews. And if you're hanging on like that, of course it's confusing and doesn't make sense and doesn't feel rational to react however you react in that. And so what kind of happens afterwards is, because he can't wrap his head around what had happened to him, it starts to bleed into other aspects of his life. It ends up getting between him and Keely. They end up breaking up, and it sends him on this whirlwind of sexual confusion where he's questioning his sexuality, questioning if the assault made him gay, made him attracted to men, found himself watching more and more extreme gay porn. He started having more reckless and risky with strangers of all genders. He found himself getting assaulted over and over and over again in an attempt to understand what happened the first time, because like, what difference does it make is the words that he used, even though of course it does. He goes on a million different dates, just meeting people, not necessarily to fall in love, but to see in some way or another if they could have the answers for him. He would ditch them in a panic a lot of times, and that was his kind of pattern until he met Terry. And again, in a really sad and dark way, when he met Martha, because Martha saw him how he wanted to be seen. And so he felt this incredibly deep irony reporting her to the police, but not the first man that assaulted him, not Darian, especially because he perceived her as mentally ill, whereas Darian was manipulative and tactical. But all the same, the police send him back home because they said, you need more evidence. Otherwise, there's nothing we can do. So bye. You and your trauma. Love the police. They always do a great job. Episode 5. So, Martha soon gets banned from the pub after the Terry incident, but it doesn't stop her from following Donnie throughout the city and yelling at him, sometimes even at his comedy shows. The only good thing that would come from that, her doing outbursts at the comedy shows, is that it resulted in him automatically getting into the finals because he couldn't do his set. And one day, Martha takes another opportunity to shift from insults and verbal abuse to attacking someone he knows, this time Keely. She goes up to her and throws Diet Coke in her face. This forces him to admit that he knows Sheila, which is the name that Martha was giving at the cooking class that the mom had seen. Her name is actually Martha, and she's been stalking me for about 6 months. And because of this, the only thing that she asks is that you don't bring trouble to my house. And she's like, I'm so sorry. I don't think we're safe here. I'm gonna need you to move out. So he does. He moves in with some friends that he knew from acting class or whatever. And they are annoying, very annoying, but it's a blessing in disguise though to move away because it allowed him to kind of start over. He was able to spend more time with Terry, and weirdly enough, they have a more flourishing relationship after the Martha attack because there was a part of him that really struggled with the urge to feel grateful to Martha because of that. The only place they seemed to be struggling in was sexually because, again, they had yet to be able to really cross that barrier well. There was issues with him being able to stay within his body. It would seem that every time they would get started, something would hold him back. I'd imagine it's his trauma, but eventually that would take its toll, right? Terry would start to internalize it. Like, is the reason why we're not able to do this sexually is because you're not attracted to me. I have all these traumas about being perceived as a man. The shame around being with me, she makes me feel like a man and you make me feel like a man. You didn't call the police the day that they came to attack me. You tried to shush me out so that they wouldn't see me. I feel like you're ashamed of me. You make me feel like shit. Making this clear, you will never have me for a second. No, I'll masturbate 10 times before taking you inside me. He goes to the police with this email that Martha had sent, and the police are like, well, all this is showing is that she don't want to be around you. We can't arrest her on that. And he was like, what the fuck do I have to say for y'all to think this is a threat? If a woman came in here with 10,000 emails from a 40-year-old man saying that he's jacking off to her, wouldn't y'all be concerned? And they're like, well, no, there's no physical issue with you and her. You're a man. He's like, being a man don't stop me from getting stabbed. Patriarchy is a bitch, man. It really is. Like, what the do you mean he's a man? So he continues. He's like begging them, please look her up. This is her name, Martha. She has a history of doing this shit. And so when they look that up, they finally take it seriously. Well, at least their ears perk up a little bit. With this information, they bring in a detective who then informs Donnie that she actually has a history of stalking a police officer too. So it's possible. Anything is possible if you just believe. And you're very tenacious. I don't discriminate. They check and they're like, all right, does she have your phone number? He was like, no. All right, let's keep it that way. In the meantime, we're going to go chat with her. And, usually the presence of the police tends to deter people. So yeah, we'll go do that. And he's like, she was stalking a police officer. That ain't gonna stop her from doing nothing. They were like, what? We'll do one thing at a time. We'll do what we can. And so after the police come around, Martha goes silent again. And that made Donnie uncomfortable because he had to ask himself if he missed her. Like the attention, the obsession, the distraction from the day to day. In a weird way, she made him feel special. So again, in a strange way of trying to learn how to process his feelings around the stalking, he found himself masturbating to that lingerie photo of Martha. I know. Man, hey, trauma, it be having you doing shit. I don't know. But despite not being physically attracted to her, he found himself having this weird sexual fascination with her to such an extent that the only way he was able to have sex with Terry is imagining that he was having sex with Martha. Therapy, baby. Please. It's so bleak. Please. Eventually, the police call him back to update him about Martha. And they said they had made contact with her and she was pretty cooperative. She just, was like, okay, I guess I'll pack it in then. And hearing this disappoints Donnie, strangely enough. Not that strangely, actually. I definitely saw that coming because again, he's like wrapped into her obsession. Apparently she wasn't upset. She didn't have anything she wanted to say to him. Nothing that she wanted them to pass on. That was it. It was over. There's still 2 more episodes left. The episode ends with Donnie's parents calling him and leaving a message saying that they're worried about him because they heard about the accident and they're calling every hospital and they can't find any information about him. The person that called them was a woman named Martha. Episode 6. Forced to address Martha and all the panic that she had caused, Donnie goes to his parents. Side note. Love his parents, particularly the dad. He's very funny. He reminds me a lot of family members of mine. He's a very cathartically angry guy. Sometimes you need that energy in the world. So things have been escalating with Martha. Now she has stopped harassing just Donnie. She had now harassed Keely and was calling his dad's work, colleagues, telling them that he was a pedophile and that he had abused her as a child. And now she somehow has his cell number and is calling to harass him regularly. But good for him, he likes to argue.
Oh, says the f***ing mad bitch pretending to be a f***ing lawyer. Call me again, I'll make sure you breathe your last, you f***ing cow of a c***.
So now that things have escalated to the fact that she's contacting his parents, he's like, I need to take this into my own hand. So he goes up to her one day, threatens her, tells her to stay away from his family. But in return, he will hang her curtain. That's awful. All you got to do is send over instructions of how you want it to happen. I want it extreme. I want it dirty. I want it gross. I want you to send it to me though. And she's like, hell yeah, I'm gonna do that. But he ends up shooting himself in the face because he ends up called in by the police and it sounds as though he's getting interrogated and he's like, what is this about? And they're like, did you contact Martha and tell her to send you sexually explicit emails? And he said, no. And they were like, you sure about that? All right. Well, Martha came in. She got hella audio recordings of essentially every time they had talked, every time they had flirted at the bar, made jokes about his penis, every time he had, said he would jokingly hang her curtains. It was all there, combined with him asking her to send him all this gross stuff and the email of him asking for butt stuff, which he didn't do. But anyway, it's not looking good. And so because of that, the police are like, I need y'all to stop antagonizing each other. Like, stop. And the way they say it is essentially, y'all are equally bad, which is obviously not the case. And they're like, luckily for you, she's not pressing charges. Oh my God. But now that his push and pull with his violent stalker has reached a fever pitch, it starts to put even more of a fracture on his relationship with Terry because again, she's like, I can't do this shit. You keep egging her on. Why did you do that? Of course that's not going to work. And I can't do this anymore. So eventually that breaks up their relationship. On a different occasion, Martha comes to the bar despite being barred and they don't kick her out because they don't have the manpower to do that. And so she's there heckling him. And one of the customers overheard her talking about his comedy. And she was like, you should watch it. Look him up. Here's his name on there. He's terrible. He's trash. And they're like laughing and kikiing until Donnie gets so mad that he's like, hey, you know what you should look up? You should look up an article called Serial Stalker Torments Barrister's Deaf Child. As you can imagine, this is an article in relation to her probably various stalker cases, but particularly the one that landed her in jail for 4 years. And this sends her over the edge, and she breaks a glass on his face, I think, and starts scratching at him. He has to punch her in the face to get her to let him go, and then they throw her ass out. And finally, this episode ends with another scene that breaks me every goddamn time. It's him up there for his comedy final competition, but instead of like doing his jokes, it's just so much that he just breaks down on the stage about everything. It turns into this long soliloquy about his assault, feeling guilty about going back to the guy, feeling guilty about ruining things with Terry, feeling guilty that his self-hatred was the one thing that he loved more than he loved her. Ooh, that one got me. I was like, oh, Jesus. Ooh, fuck. Ooh, ooh. And oof. There's so many like really rough scenes, but that one's a lot. Episode 7. In a weird moment of serendipity, one of the audience members had secretly recorded his speech about all his traumas and uploaded it to YouTube. It had gone viral. And suddenly Danny's career started taking off because his speech, as you can imagine, really impacted, really resonated with a lot of people. And I'd imagine it resonated with a lot of men who feel like all of their emotions are so like trapped in like that, especially with like a history of assault. Like that's, oh God. And so he's starting to get some media attention, and it seems that he's kind of making some traction in his life. Things are starting to get brighter for once. And of course, at this moment, in comes Martha. She had found his phone number. Yay. And she's like, I'm gonna tell your parents. I'm sure your dad doesn't look like the type who's very accepting. And so this makes him go back to his parents' home, where he sits them down and he basically tells them like, I need to tell you a lot of shit. I posted a video up. I need to tell you that in that video, there's a lot of things about my sexuality, about being assaulted, about Martha, about how he really needs their support in this moment. And he hid all these things because he didn't want them to think of him as less of a man. Oh, patriarchy, bitch! Oh, toxic masculinity. This is toxic masculinity. Patriarchy makes it so that it's more important that he's seen as a man than for him to be happy and healthy, for him to be honest and to get any justice. That shit takes paramount, and it fucks everyone over every day. That shit is terrible for everybody. And it's just like, oh, but he says this thing of like, I didn't want you guys to see me as less than a man.
I just feel less of one. Never let something like that happen to me.
Would you see me as less of one?
What?
Would you see me as less of a man? I grew up in the Catholic Church.
In that moment, they both realize that both of them have been traumatized generationally. It's something that they both experienced separately, but not alone. And it's something that spearheads a moment of compassion that I think the hardness of his father very rarely gave him. But this is a moment of rejuvenation for them now. Like everything's out there. He feels lighter. He spends quite a while at home, keeping his phone off, just like enjoying being with his parents. And as he gets ready to go back to London, he feels lighter. He has his parents' support. They're encouraging him to try to make things work with Terry, in the way that they know how.
Good luck with a transsexual.
Yep, thank you, Dad.
That scene is very funny. It gives very his pronouns are they them. Like old people trying to be supportive. I appreciate you. You did your best. But now he turns his phone back on and he's bombarded, call after call, message after message, just bombarded with Martha. Once again, he goes back to the police. He says, she is calling me right now. I don't know how she got my number. I think she got it in like a out of office email that probably had it at the bottom, and that's how she got his number. And the police are just as useful as usual. They're saying like, oh, we don't know if it's her though, if she calls from an unknown number. Like, who else would it be? Damn. And so instead they're like, why don't you do our jobs? Why don't you take a listen to the voicemails and write down when she says something threatening? And so he becomes so obsessed with listening to those voicemails. He starts organizing them, trying to make sense of them, organizes them by subject and emotion. And in a weird thing, he found himself at that beginning point again, pitying her, relating to her, her insecurities, her suffering, her isolation. He he's reminded how at one point she was a welcome distraction to his life. But he ends up hearing one voicemail, which is her threatening to stab someone. And because she had been harassing his family, that was the last straw for him. And he's able to use that as her smoking gun to get her arrested. So she's charged for harassment and stalking, sentenced to 9 months in jail with a 5-year restraining order. The is that gonna do? I'm sorry. This shit never stops making me mad. Like it does. It just makes me so mad. Like she pled guilty, which is probably why she got such a light sentence. But like, can the restraining order at least be lifelong? Like what the you don't ever need to come around me again. But damn. But Donnie says that this is the last time he would ever see Martha, was in the courtroom of her sentencing or her pleading or whatever. One day, Keeley comes to visit Donnie. One of his roommates was concerned because he hadn't left out of the room in like 2 weeks. And when she gets there, he had started scripting what we're watching right now, Baby Reindeer, so that he can make sense of Martha and the experience of Martha. He had also, again, organized her voicemails by emotion, and they had slowly become sort of the soundtrack of his life as he's trying to better unpack what that was. But Keeley's like, now that we know everything that's gone on, I don't feel right having you in an unstable place. Please move back in with my mom. And so when he gets there, he's happy to be back, but of course the house reminds him of things. One of the things that it reminds him is that he has a box of his items the mom had kept when he moved out, and one of them was his box of scripts that he had sent over to Darian, and one that particularly he put the note on that he was, he was so talented, or he's gonna go far, or something complimentary like that. And so in a scene that again turns my stomach, he decides to give Darian a visit, and again in this terrible stomach turning way, it's casual and pleasant, them talking. Darian says that he had seen the video and he calls him brave. Sorry, that's it's so fucked. And then Darian offers to have him work with him again as a writer, saying that this time will be different. He'll be paid. And Donnie says that he'd love that. When he runs out of the apartment, he's on a trauma spiral, as you'd imagine. He's crying in the street. And he found himself listening to voicemails from Martha that he had categorized under complimentary to calm him down. He keeps listening to her until he winds up at a bar, and in one of the audios, she gives why she calls him Baby Reindeer, which is because when she was a child and her parents were fighting all the time, she had a toy from her childhood that she still has to this day that was a baby reindeer, and she said that he looked so much like it, and that it and him, they both mean so much to her. He begins to cry in this bar when the bartender comes over, but he had left his wallet at home, and the bartender says, "Don't worry, it's on me." And that's the end of Baby Reindeer. Oh, it's so good. And probably what makes it, oh god, there's just so much. Again, I think the core premise is in so many ways the spiral of a guy trying to just figure out how to live without all of the self-loathing that had been placed on him via the expectations of society, the expectations of him as a man, whatever that means, the expectations of him as someone trying to make it in the biz, about how men are kind of ignored in the grand scheme of like sexual violence. It's very easy to say things like perpetrators are just evil. And Martha is interesting because she's a sympathetic perpetrator, which I think is a lot more accurate than like the pure evil that some people make like perpetrators out to be. Donnie is an imperfect victim, and I think that also is something to consider. I just think it's such a sophisticated take on something that's been done, like a stalker story. I love a Fatal Attraction, baby. I've watched many of them, but it's not as two-dimensional as that, as like just a thriller. It's so fucking gutting, and part of the reason that is because it's based on a true story, baby, of the man who plays Donnie. He's also the creator of Baby Reindeer, Richard Gadd. And it's, if I remember correctly, is based off of a play that he had done of the same name. That is the recanting of the story. And since then, of course, internet sleuths are like really focused on like who Martha is. And apparently the person who Martha is based off of is threatening to sue and yada, yada, yada. And like people trying to guess who Darian is in real life and who that assailant is. I think that's less of the point of why this was made. I think it's just to give a nuanced take on men, a masculine condition, the shame associated with being a man innately, because that's what keeps you in line, and how that not only hurts you as a man, but it hurts so many people around you, that it can perpetuate pain, worsen it, inflict it onto others. And though I wouldn't say that the show has necessarily a quote unquote happy ending, because again, Donnie is still kind of wrapped in these cycles of self-loathing, I do think finding out that openness has been such a way to enlighten his heart, enlighten his life, to build him closer to his family, particularly his father, I think is definitely probably the first step in turning things around, I'm sure. I feel like this is such an insight that I highly doubt that Richard Gadd was never in therapy. I hope that means he was. Not only just making people feel seen, but making them consider that closeness and community is what can definitely lead to some healing. Because I think a lot of the pain and a lot of the struggles that Richard Gadd, or Donnie, however you think about it, suffers are perpetuated by isolating and by being alone and by suffering in silence. And to have even his father say, "You're not as alone as you think you are," is really powerful. And yeah, I just have so many thoughts that I honestly don't have time to talk about more today, because I've been talking for like 2.5, 3 hours. So I'm gonna end it here. I want to know if you guys watched it though. Tell me what you think. But if you've seen it, let me know. If you've only heard about it through this video, do you think you'll watch it? It's very good, but I also would not judge you if you did not, because it's heavy as sometimes the most traumatic media is the most healing, so I'll keep that to your discretion. But yeah, it's very good. It's a very, very good show. It gets the hype for a reason. It makes sense why it connects to so many people. And yeah, I was a big fan. So anyway, if you like this video, feel free to like this video, comment on all my social media, Instagram and Twitter, brother, which are KennieJD. If there's other shows, other movies, other things you want me to see, feel free to put those down in the comment section. And I will see you guys next time.